Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a Tuesday night edition of the RotoWire After Dark Champions League show. My name is Jack Burkart. You can find me on Twitter at Jack Burkart, and I'm joined by Basil Nabi again. We're running it back. Basil, your debut went great. You gave the people Chukwueze, who scored a goal right away. You might have even pumped his ownership up a little bit at 40%, but he was probably going to be a pretty good play anyways. So I thought you did great yesterday. We're glad to have you back on again. How did your Tuesday slate go? I know you weren't able to watch, but I guess you probably had time to take a look at the final results.
Yeah, just did a bit of a review. I mean, looking at my point totals, I was happy, but ultimately it sounds like there's a lot of high scoring lineups out there. And if you didn't have Cancelo, then you weren't a winner. So I had zero exposure to Cancelo. So not that great, but happy to see some of my other thoughts and predictions being positive. But overall, not a good day since I did not win the King of the Pitch ticket.
Yeah, well, I guess you're a mortal like the rest of us. You're not going to win every single time. I thought the slate was a disaster while I was going through, but I had a lineup make the top 10. It wasn't a sweat at all because if you didn't have Cancelo, it was just over for you. So FSI's Tendril Storm, he's a regular. He takes down the ticket with a Barcelona-heavy team. Not a spot we really looked at, Basil. I think I was telling you, I just preferred Teo and Hakimi, but maybe that makes Cancelo a good play as a contrarian option. What do you think in hindsight?
I still don't think so because of the price. I just think he costs more. And although Cancelo was expected to get a lot of minutes, I think the other Barcelona options due to rotation were risky and, splitting sets potentially. So there wasn't enough players there that I liked. But I guess if there was going to be one to play, that was the one to play because of minutes and potential goal scoring upside.
Yeah, it's not the first time we've seen Cancelo break the slate. So just looking at Storm's lineup, he's got 4 Barcelona pieces. Even gets there with the backup goalkeeper. There weren't many clean sheets today, so goalkeeper wasn't a terrible factor on this slate whatsoever. Yeah, maybe Cancelo and maybe Rafinha I considered just in a couple tournament lineups, but I only played 3 lineups and I just ultimately didn't get there. But I mean, Cancelo at 3% scores 35 points. Sick play. I mean, you do it for that reason, and sometimes you win because of it. So shout out Storm for that. Basil, I wanted to throw your lineups out here. Why don't you talk a little bit about how you approached the slate? I know you gave us a bit of a preview to what you were thinking. I noticed that Chukwueze was in every single one of your lineups as that cheap salary relief at 43%. And you also locked in Teo Hernandez. I noticed you locked in Rico Lewis. I have your best performing lineup, which had Mbappe, Foden, Ugrinik, Chukwueze, Hernandez, Rico Lewis, your boy Jan Oblak. And I sold you on Marshak Ilya. I'll claim credit for that, all $0 of the lineup. But why don't you tell us how you approached your 5 set for this King of the Pitch contest?
Yeah, so I just decided that I like Teo more than Hakimi. So I just opted for, and then when I saw Rico Lewis playing, someone who doesn't get full 90s all the time and doesn't play all the time for Man City. So that was someone I was happy to play. So I just decided to lock the 2 defenders in. And the rest, and Chukwueze, of course, for price. The rest was sort of, I had a list of players that I was somewhat interested in and looked for ways to have correlation there, but I didn't want any other PSG players, so I was happy to play Mbappe by himself. And the salary just fit for the 2 young boys players, so that was how they ended up in this lineup in particular.
Very nice. And then if I look at some others, you got Hwang. You threw in Gundogan in one lineup right here. I noticed you had Erling Haaland as well. Seems like a simple pivot. But what else did you do? I mean, let's take a look at the one that didn't quite perform so well.
Yeah,
this was your Feyenoord stack. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Foden appeared in all of them. I wasn't really sure, but it ended up working out. And then, Gundogan ended up in 1. That was just in case because I wasn't really sure. It was kind of a hedge there with the Rafinha situation. I just didn't really know, and it just happened to work salary wise. So I knew I wanted no more than 1 lineup with Gundogan in there.
Mm-hmm.
So he just happened to fit there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I mean, it looks like you were pretty dialed in on the best plays that you were talking about. You make sure that you fit in a Griezmann lineup that makes sense. You fit in Pulisic, a lot of Milan players. And I mean, I don't know what happened to AC Milan, Basil. It's not a team I watch too much. I knew you were in on them, but such a frustrating performance at home, capitulating 1-3 like that. Teo Hernandez doesn't even really get much of a floor. Just not something I really expected. I know he kind of doesn't have like, a locked in 10 points, but I'm like, come on, give me 7 or 8 at least in this spot.
Yeah, I mean his numbers are pretty consistent. I feel like it. I was expecting at least double that on points as a floor, but it just didn't work out this time. And yeah, of course, the one Donnarumma lineup I threw in was a loser. Newcastle does it again and does not lose. So it is what it is. But I had all black and all the other ones. I mean, I'm happy with that point output. So that was the goalkeeper I was most confident in.
Yeah, I needed Oblak to bail me out in cash. I needed a couple miracles based on how everything sorted out. But you sold me on that spot, and he worked out to be a pretty good goalkeeper. So, outsourcing my goalkeeper to you, Basil, I think that's going to be a pretty fine way to play moving forward. So, we'll just just hit me up every day with the goalkeeper. Goalkeeper du jour. Yeah, I got Ozzy in the chat. He's saying the Mbappe penalty was very tilting. I played Pope. Basil, you said you weren't watching, but it was a VAR penalty at like the 94th minute, and the ball went off of the defender's chest and then hit his elbow. And then after VAR review, the referee awarded the penalty. Just something that you don't really see in the Premier League. So all of the Mbappe donks raise hands, myself included.
Yep.
Got a nice bailout. So I guess I can't complain too much about my misfortunes, but he was still pretty chalky, so that wasn't enough to save the day. But Ozzy, man, sorry to hear that. Sometimes we just can't get these goalkeepers right. Any last thoughts on how you approach the king of the pitch? Anything you would change, you think, based on what you notice?
I mean, for someone like me that just plays primarily those where you can have multiple lineups, this was a scenario where I decided to not diversify on defender and got punished, because I think if I had diversified there, I could have gotten pretty close. I think I definitely would have had at least one lineup with Cancelo. If you add those points in to one of these top 4 lineups I have, you're looking at 130 plus. So I would have been in a good spot if I had done a little bit of rotation.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you can crank up Teo to Cancelo, and then Rico Lewis, you play Garcia. I mean, Cancelo being the contrarian play, that lineup ships just about everything. But, in DFS, we're always 2v2s away from the winner. So such is life. But, yeah, I mean, I get it. I sometimes just jam players. It just helps me conceptualize my lineups a little bit better. And when Rico and Teo lay an egg, well, there's always the Wednesday slate. And so Here we are. I want to talk a little bit about cash. I haven't tweeted about it yet, so let me move the tab on over. A super frustrating day in cash games for me, Basil. So maybe you can give me your thoughts about how I approached it. I know cash isn't your primary thing, but I think you do a good job projecting these players, so I'd appreciate your opinion. So ultimately, at forward, I was considering Mbappe, Griezmann, and Phil Foden. I was definitely going to spend up twice, and I thought that Foden had a chance to take some set pieces in this spot. But I was just looking at the floors, and Mbappe just enjoys such high shot volume in this PSG offense and had better goal odds. And you also kind of convinced me that it might be a fragile spot for Phil Foden, maybe a decent range of outcomes where he gets subbed early and things like that. So I didn't play Foden. I swapped off him late, and he absolutely gives me the blade. But, that can happen. I understand that can happen when I fade someone who's as skilled and on a great spot like Phil Foden. But still, Mbappe did really well. Griezmann did great. Own goal on a direct free kick goal, so what could have been, but it just seems like he's going to be a great DFS slate moving forward. I mean, Atleti seemed like an incredible squad. And then I opted for a more balanced construction. So I saw people use Chukwueze, who was 40% in this double up. I'll highlight a lineup that does that. And that allowed them to maybe get an extra forward, pump up a little bit at goalie, something like that. But I was talking about it on the show yesterday, and I liked Ugrinik as a solid play. He gets a 12-point floor. Huang started without Kanga, and so I thought it was rocket ships for him. And he almost scored. He hit post, and then it dinged like just 1 degree off. So that really, really stunk to see. And then I just thought I played the best defender plays. I thought 3 defenders was pretty good in a more balanced build. So I thought Rikus and Ulysses Garcia were the priorities in there. And then I was left with Teo Hernandez at 5,600. So in this type of construction, I was just never really getting to a Chukwueze lineup. But if you pull up something that other people did, so if we look at, Pew Pew Pew, I think, no, he actually took on a more balanced constructing using Elia instead at a forward spot. But I think, so Fear the Turtle. He did a similar lineup, so spend up twice at forward, but then use the Chukwueze spot in order to afford like someone like a Trippier. You could have used Chukwueze to afford someone like a Christian Pulisic and pay up a little bit at goalkeeper. So those looked like the decisions, but I don't know, Basil. How do you think I played? I think I'd play the same way again. I'm frustrated by the outcome personally.
I think your lineup was very close to where I would want to be. I just, in most cases, would not play three defenders here because I liked Chukwueze so much. You convinced me on the two midfielders in that Young Boys and Red Star game because they appeared in multiple of my lineups. When you saw that Kanga wasn't playing, I agree that Inbom was good. Greenwich also seemed good. I liked Griezmann. Rico Lewis, it is what it is. I still think it was a good pick, but I just don't think I would end up with both Teo and Garcia there. So I think if you shift Teo to the defender and you just played Chukwueze, that would very much look like a lineup I would have. And I think that would also give you enough salary to have played Holland over Mbappe if you wanted to go that route as well. So, the lineup would have been very close to that regardless. So, yeah, I think we're pretty aligned on where you ended up, actually.
Oh, well, that's comforting to hear. Maybe you're just flattering me, though. No, I'm kidding. It was just one of those frustrating runouts. I mean, I think if you have Rico and Teo and you spent that kind of salary, and a lot of the popular plays just went off. I didn't have Foden. I didn't have Chukwueze. I was doing my best to keep up. I think that showed that this lineup had some merit based on floor, but, just not my day in the office. Boo-hoo, I guess. But, I'll come back at them. You can take some of my, low rent head-to-heads if you want to take me on in the lobby tomorrow and if you think my lineup stunk. But, yeah, I could have played Teo at a defender spot and then Ulysses and then improved a goalkeeper or played Haaland. Though I think Mbappe has a better floor than Haaland in this type of spot. The goal odds were similar enough, but whatever. Yeah. I don't know. Any last thoughts on reviewing the slate?
No, I mean, I think we covered everything. I just think, we just overlooked the upside of Cancelo, even though in hindsight, it's obviously 2020. I still don't think it was correct to play. I think it was overpriced compared to Hakimi and Teo, and it is what it is.
Yeah, I agree. And that's, I guess, when you have to start factoring in ownership. And that's really hard to do, and you have to have a really good feel for what the field is going to do. So, I don't know. I always find it dangerous to think about these things. But I do agree. He just wasn't a value, and that just wasn't the type of decision that just wasn't the type of decision we were dialed in on. But oh well, we'll get him next time. Maybe we'll give people another Chukwueze as well. So let's break it down. Let's get into this slate that's going to happen on Wednesday. It's kind of an interesting slate, and there's a huge problem. It's that Bayern Munich are massive favorites and have absolutely nothing to play for. So who knows who's going to start? If Harry Kane starts, does he play more than 50 minutes? He's minus 275 to score, and he could score 2 goals in the form he's in against Copenhagen at home in those 60 minutes. So I always hate slates like these, but maybe we can do our best and get a feel for what the range of outcomes on the Munich players are. But they do have nothing to play for. I think in that group, it's Manchester United on 12 points, Copenhagen on 3, and then Copenhagen on 4. You're Manchester United on 3, and then they have a big game in the noon slate against Galatasaray. How are you feeling about your Manchester United? Do you think they can escape out of this group mess they put themselves in?
I mean, it never feels good, but they keep winning. That's the thing, is if you look at the recent results, they are winning. The games are ugly, and I'm not happy to watch them. But yeah, I mean, I don't feel good about it, but they should win. So we will see.
They should. Although, is it a home game or are they going off to Turkey?
I actually don't know.
I think they played Galatasaray. No, I think like the Galatasaray fans like trashed the stadium or something like that.
Yeah, I think they were in. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that'll be exciting either way. That doesn't affect how Bayern Munich will approach the game, though. But good luck to your Red Devils. Then the other big favorite is Arsenal. They're in the lead in their group. They have a 4-point lead right now, and with the win over Lyon, they will be able to win the group, and they'll probably try to do that at home. They have similar win odds to Bayern Munich, a slightly worse implied goal total, though, and slightly better clean sheet odds. So those look like the two dominant matchups. Real Sociedad have started really finding some nice offensive form, and it's a great matchup against Red Bull Salzburg, who haven't really done much so far. Real Madrid have a lot of injuries, and they're hosting Napoli. Real Madrid can seal first place with the win over Napoli, but there's not as much pressure. And then the two other games we have Braga. I think they're fighting for a Europa League spot, or I think they might be fighting for second place. I'll have to double check the standings. But I think it's an important game for Braga, who are going against last place Union Berlin in their group. Union have been terrible in Bundesliga, conceding a lot of goals. So it might be a nice spot to get some value on these Braga players. And then we have Benfica at home to Inter Milan. Benfica, 0 points, 4 losses in Champions League so far. Inter Milan are a solid outfit, so they're still slight favorites at home, but it's tough to get excited. And Benfica themselves have also been suffering from injuries. So, Basil, when you were taking a look at these matches, what were your thoughts initially?
Well, of course, I was excited about Bayern, but like you said, they don't have anything to play for, which is also a concern. So my initial thought is kind of like we talked about yesterday. Players that don't play regularly, I would like to pick if they're playing for Bayern from the start. I have serious concerns about paying up for someone like Kane, but then again, even 45 to 60 minutes of Kane could get a goal or two in that matchup. But, the other team does have a lot to play for too. So maybe they'll just play really good defense and, try and squeak out a 0-0 draw or something like that. But ultimately, I still think Bayern backups should get some goals there if they play. But I would be concerned about regular starters that normally play 90 in that match. And I have concerns about that Inter match. When I was looking at the odds, they weren't exactly as I was expecting. So I'd be concerned to pick players there because I don't really know what's going on there.
Did you expect Inter to be bigger favorites?
I expected them to be, I expected them to be favorites. Pinnacle has them as underdogs. I'm not sure if you guys have them as underdogs.
Yeah, so sorry. It's about a toss-up, so Inter, they're probably going to be like plus 110 on Pinnacle or something like this, maybe plus 120.
And they have Inter at plus 192.
Oh, geez. Okay, I can't read 50%. No, yeah, because there's a draw, so it's not going to be plus 120. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I guess the home matchup is being weighted there. I don't know.
Yeah, so I have concerns, but teams that I don't know much about that are big favorites that look good, like Real Sociedad, that's looking appealing. I also like Madrid. It seems like they're missing a lot of players, so I think you can expect more minutes from the players that are playing. So those are kind of the spots I'm looking at. And then Arsenal as a big favorite in a game that actually matters, I like. So those are kind of the spots I'd be targeting. So Bayern is the concern. Is like, of course, they have the easiest matchup, but minutes concerns and who starts are the main issues there.
Yeah, that's a huge issue. So if we take a look at the Bayern lineup that Adam is projecting, so typical back line for them, Alphonso Davies and Mazraoui at fullback. Then we have Kimmich and Goretzka, more defensive midfielders. And Adam's projecting Serge Gnabry. So he had an injury in October, and he's kind of reintegrating the squad. He missed a recent match due to illness, but Adam's projecting him to have a start on the left wing. Thomas Muller, 34 years old, attacking midfield role. And then Leroy Sané also starting with Harry Kane leading the line. Maybe we'll see someone like, I'm going to say his name wrong, Matthias Tells, who's a really young talent. He hasn't gotten his first start for Bayern Munich yet. Maybe this is a nice spot at home in a game that it's okay if it doesn't go so well for him. He's been spectacular as a substitute, 5 goals and 3 assists. But Basil, so you're talking about, well, if these players don't regularly start for Bayern, I'd feel good about their minutes. I still don't feel good about their minutes. Gnabry hasn't gone over 70 minutes this season, and Thomas Muller, he's old now, and he rarely plays over 65. So do you think those guys, maybe, okay, it's different context, so they get a few more minutes? How are you approaching that?
Maybe not Muller because of age, but like someone like Gnabry is someone that I feel more confident going longer, especially if someone like Tell, like some of the younger players are already in the game, if they're starting with him, right? That's how I would look at it. Then that's my concern about like committing to players in this match is until you really see the lineups, I just don't. It's hard to piece it together. It's kind of how I felt about Man City in today's slate.
Yeah, you want to see what the bench looks like. You want to have a better feel for the precise formation and that type of thing. So I think those are definitely good points. But yeah, Harry Kane, 11,000, Leroy Sané, 10.1K. You're paying a premium for either of those players. And you can look to a similar arsenal where you got someone like Bukayo Saka, 10.5K. And Gabriel Martinelli, 9.3K at home. That's not a terrible spot. Adam doesn't have Gabriel Jesus, but 8,700 as a forward. You're paying a little bit more than you are for like a Gnabry, but I mean, it's a game that matters. So it kind of sounds appealing in comparison, although scary as it is to fade Bayern Munich players.
Right, exactly. This is obviously easier if you're playing something with multiple entries, but something like cash, you're just going to have to make a call there and decide, do you value the minutes more or the game that matters more, and pick a side.
My first impression, Basil, is to value the game that matters a little bit more, and that's a scary decision. So maybe we can start getting into forward position and who the top plays look like. But again, the three most expensive options, if this was a game that mattered for Bayern Munich, we'd be talking about, yeah, we're probably just going to play Kane, tail the field a little bit, and at minus 275. He doesn't have much of a floor, but a goal and a half, that feels like a pretty good spot that you want to bank on, especially home against Copenhagen. Bukayo Saka gets to take half of the corners for Arsenal. Occasionally he takes a penalty, although Arsenal do this whole friendship thing where they just, give Kai Havertz a penalty so to cheer him up a little bit. So, I wish he had penalties, but he does great all the time. He's one of the best young players in England. So he's a really good floor play at 10.5K. If Harry Kane only scores one goal, I feel like Saka can catch up, but I'd need a real Saka blow up to keep up with Kane, I think. So it's a little bit scary, but it seems cash viable, and he'll probably play 90. Then you would have Leroy Sané at 10.1K. He chips in with some corners on like one side. I think I'm not going to say left or right, but he does take one side of corners even when Kimmich is on the pitch. You're worried about the minutes though. So Basil, if you're playing cash or if you're trying to parse this decision out, would you side with me and maybe consider just taking Saka because the game matters and the game gets the minutes? And it's also a pretty similar game environment.
Yeah, I would be leaning Arsenal over Bayern players, given that they're close in price and, they could have somewhat similar outcomes, but, the Arsenal players are slightly cheaper when you compare Kane to Saka and, Sané to any of the other options on Arsenal.
Yeah, and it's not like Kane gets substituted too frequently, but they have to take care of his minutes. I mean, I think he's 30 years old as well. I know the Bundesliga has a break, but I mean, who are they trying to impress? Especially when they're second place in the Bundesliga. I think this is something I blurbed in my article draft. It feels like Bayern have some more important priorities, at least in the domestic competition. What other forwards were on your radar that were expensive, whether it be, in cash games or tournaments? I know there's a single entry king of the pitch, so you kind of want to keep, you don't want to go too far off the reservation when you select forwards, but who else was standing out to you?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking expensive, it's kind of the obvious ones, kind of like we've already mentioned, Kane, Sané, Saka, Martinelli, and Rodrigo is the other one I'd be looking at for people that are, over 9, but that may be all of the people over 9. So
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's the ones that I would be considering, but I have a feeling I will lean no Bayern. So, but we will see. We'll see how I feel by tomorrow when the lineups come out and submit for that king of the pitch.
Yeah. So it seems, if it's that starting lineup, maybe it goes that direction, but there are other spots. I opened up Rodrigo games log and like my jaw dropped. I mean, look at this ridiculous goal scoring form. He's getting a lot of minutes, and the Real Madrid team is really suffering from injuries. If we look at some key players out, I think Vinny Jr. is out with a hamstring injury. Who else is out for them? A lot of their midfielders are out, so not really an ideal spot. But yeah, I think those were the expensive forwards that stuck out to me. I don't know if I would play a Rodrigo type in cash, but I think if I spend up once in cash games, it probably would be for Bukayo Saka. I don't know. A lot of these players make a case for themselves, and it's Champions League. So you're just saying, Rodrigo, everyone's going to score pretty well. I think Rodrigo scores the most. You just make that bet, and you hope it pays off for you. I don't know. This is one thing I learned about Champions League, though. I always got all fussy, like, oh, I'm playing Rodrigo, so I'm fading all of the other spots. I'm like, no, Jack, Arsenal are still going to do pretty well. And, those other teams are still going to do pretty well. You're just betting that the whole cumulative effort is just, you have the 35 points instead of the 28 points at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you have to decide if you are going to bet on Kane or Sané playing enough minutes. If they are not, then you can move down to Saka and Martinelli, but a decision point does come in where you could say that Rodrigo may be better than Martinelli, given that Martinelli has a chance to get subbed off early, and Rodrigo probably doesn't, given the injuries at Real Madrid. So
you're going to want to check if Josselu's on the bench.
But it also depends who starts with Rodrigo, right? Because if you do get, I believe it is there's another player who doesn't normally play there who's playing because Vinny is hurt, right? So
Raheem Diaz has been getting some action lately.
Yeah, so that's someone that could get subbed off for Josselu.
Definitely, yeah. Raheem Diaz is a 5,600 midfielder in this spot, but he is definitely going to, Josselu would come on for him. So I think that's a really sharp added context here. Probably will feel good about Rodrigo's minutes in this spot. And another downgrade to Martinelli potentially is if Trossard starts and plays in this false nine role, because I think Trossard takes corners on the opposite side of Saka. So Martinelli, even if he's in a good spot, when you remove set pieces, it just becomes a bit more of a volatile asset. You're really more betting on a brace than you are maybe like a 10-point floor and a goal. That's a really interesting shout.
Trossard for sure. I think if the start is there, even if you're projecting 60 to 75 minutes, but could go more based on the recent logs, that seems like an auto include. But I believe he's only listed as midfielder in this slate.
Midfield only, yeah. Sometimes these are a bit sticky to update on the cheat sheet, but Trossard is midfield only, unfortunately. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good breakdown, though, of the more expensive options. What else stands out to you? I mean, maybe it's a slate where you just pay up twice, so you don't really worry about these middling options, but there were some interesting options in the 8K range. I mean, Lautaro, I think in week 2 threw my laptop out the window. He had like 10 expected goals and 10 fantasy points total, but always an interesting option at 8,000, though, the pinnacle odds aren't looking so good. So that's something that should concern us a little bit. And then there's a couple exciting 6,000 range options. So Angel Di Maria usually plays 80 minutes or more, takes some set pieces, and I think he's taken some penalties. I'd have to double check that. And then you also have I don't want to screw this up actually. His last name's Horta, but there's 2 Hortas on Braga, the $6,600 one. Ricardo Horta. He occasionally chips in with a set piece, but he's like a number 10 player who is pretty active in open play. Both those seem fine as like a second forward in cash if you don't want to spend up, or if you just have that sort of money laying around. What stuck out to you in the mid-range at forward, Basil?
Yeah, the Braga players, to be honest, I don't know anything about them, but Horta and Alvaro Jallo look like they should get some good minutes. And if you look at their logs, I mean, I know it's just from Champions League, but based on their cost, I think look like good value. And, there is this Simon Bonza, who you guys have slated to start, who may get, 45 to 60 minutes for 4,400 for a forward. I'm pretty interested. So there's definitely some options depending on how you construct. If you want to pay up at midfield, you could go a little bit cheaper at forward, especially given some of the concerns that we've already mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, Jallo, he's 5,700 playing as a forward in a good matchup. And I think Banza, I had him written down as he's taken a penalty, though I would have to double check. No shame in not knowing all of these Portuguese guys, Basil, and how they all play. But I do know that Bruma is an interesting kind of winger. I played him for really expensive in a 2-game slate, and I think he bailed me out actually with 2 late goals. So he's an exciting player, but when you're priced around the 7K range in a good matchup against a leaky Union Berlin defense, I mean, sign me up.
Yep, that's someone I had down as well. It looks like, the point expectation to price is pretty similar based on value, Bruma versus Horta. So I think that could be one of those decisions. It just comes down to how much money you have available there.
Yeah, or you flip a coin or something like that. Yeah, that sounds pretty exciting overall. Do any of these other cheaper forwards stand out to you? I think one did for me, or is it 2? I know one, Roko Simic, he's 4,100. I know he plays for Salzburg, but I thought, I don't know, he's a pretty talented young player. When you're 4,100, but that's probably a little bit too thin. Anyone else in this like 5,000 and below bin that sounds interesting to you?
I only had Simon Bonza down there. I think if I'm going to play someone in that price range, it'll be him.
Oh, I actually had one for you. He's going to start for Benfica. Kasper Tengstedt. He's my favorite new player that I just learned about a half hour ago. But he's 4,300, and he played 80 minutes in his most recent start for Benfica. They have a lot of injuries. Can't be so bad for a home center forward.
Yeah, I just don't know what to think about that game based on the odds. I mean, obviously, if Benfica is a favorite now, according to Pinnacle, then it doesn't seem like a bad pick. But I mean, Inter's going to play a back five. They have real defenders, and well, I don't know how good their defenders are, but they have a real goalie, and there's still 5 defenders back there. So I don't know.
I respect their defenders. I think Acerbi is a really strong defender, and De Vrij, I know he's been rated well, and he's been starting for a while. And Darmian is definitely like a griddle veteran. I mean, Benfica have stunk. Maybe we can just leave it at that. They haven't really troubled anyone, so I think Inter can definitely handle them. But at least have to consider a $4,300 forward when you see it.
Definitely.
I think that's a pretty good breakdown of the forward position. Was there anyone else that you wanted to mention?
Nope, covered.
Nailed it. Cross that off the list. Moving on. All right, Basil. Do we just jam the best player in the world, Jude Bellingham?
I'm pretty interested. It's hard to argue. I mean, look at the logs,
I'll pull him up.
He's just so good.
He's incredible.
Definitely a player that's high on my list for this slate because the game matters. So
it does matter. I want to pull up exactly. Yeah, Real Madrid. It's not the hugest deal. I think a tie is definitely enough for them, but they'll still want to put in a good effort. I don't think these teams want to leave any ambiguity into day 6 whenever they can. So if there's anything that they can do to improve their situation, that 1 seed also matters. We've seen a lot of horror show round of 16 performances that come when a team slips down to 2nd place. So they're not going to want, Napoli to, pull off a smash and grab. But I just pulled up Jude Bellingham's game logs, and, at 9,600, you're like, oh, he doesn't really take set pieces, but, often getting 3 or more shots per game. He's one of the main creative thrusts in the attack. He gets fouled quite a lot, which is very helpful. And he's just an active box-to-box midfielder. You're picking up a few points when you're looking at these defensive peripherals. Not something we often think about Basil, but when you're projecting a player out, he's got to grade pretty well from a floor point of view.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of, midfield only value, I don't know if there's even any other high-priced players there, but it looks like Bryce Mendes and Kimmich. So it's not really comparable in terms of price point, but I guess you're comparing him to some of the other high-priced forwards that we mentioned. But I feel a lot more comfortable with Bellingham over someone like Kane because of minutes. I just think Bellingham will play, and Bellingham scores all the time. So I would personally feel more comfortable there and pay down at forward.
Yeah, especially when there are some viable mid-range forward options. There are some intriguing punts. Sometimes if you're trying to decide where to spend up, looking where the punts are best, this is a Ryan Belangi lesson. That often gives you a little bit of a hint where the optimal place might look. But yeah, you're comparing Bellingham to a Leroy Sané. That doesn't sound so unreasonable. Compare him to a Martinelli with no set pieces. I don't know. The case kind of starts to make itself if you start to play all of these things out.
Yeah, I think that one is clear. I think the Martinelli Rodrigo options, I would put Bellingham above. I think, you just the Bayern thing is really throwing everything off. If you think the minutes are going to be there for those attacking players, then maybe I go that way. Otherwise, I think someone like Bellingham makes more sense.
Yeah, I very much agree. Well, if you look at some interesting players who are priced, just 1,500 or 2,000 below, I think the names at the top of the list is actually quite a rich midfield position. You have Bryce Mendes. He's taken a couple of penalties for Real Sociedad. I think Oyarzabal, if that's how you say his name, would take them as a priority. But, I mean, that's still nice to know that he has those in his pocket. He splits set pieces with Takifusa Kubo, who's at 7,700. Both are putting up nice floors, and Real Sociedad's in awesome form. And there's the question about what do we do with Josh Kimmich? He's not taking monopoly of set pieces anymore. This isn't your same Bayern Munich in the past. So if he's not going to take every set piece and there are some minutes worries, is Kimmich really an auto click in cash games, or at 7,800, maybe that risk is mitigated a little bit at his price?
Yeah, I think when you have Trossard at 74, if he's starting, I don't see a world where I'm ever putting Kimmich in. And some of the other options, that are a little bit less than Kimmich, I just think are better options. So that's where I would be looking. I did have a question for you though on Oyarzabal. I think in in Adam's projections, it looks like he wasn't there. Do you know what the story is there? Is that a guess of rest, or is he actually labeled as out?
So there is a chance that this is what the lineup was over the weekend, and Adam hasn't had a chance to update. So the slate came out late, and then like the way that the software works out, it like plugs in old lineups, and then it does require some manual input in order to put it back in. So I think he's going to start, and if you see Sadiq, who's in his place, started and played 75 minutes over the weekend. So my guess is that the lineups will be a little bit more sorted out, a little bit more dialed in tomorrow morning if you want to take a look and get prepped. If he's healthy, though, he's in great form. You would expect him to start, but Adam can chime in and comment on the video or yell at me in the chat if I'm saying something wrong.
But yeah, that's otherwise Oyarzabal, like you said, is someone I'd be interested in. I just think he's a very good player. So, good player, good matchup. I'd be happy to play him.
And you can play him in a forward spot as well. I don't know why I just deleted the midfielders there. Yeah, I had the same impression. I was like making a dummy lineup, and I'm like, do I really want to play Kimmich over Trossard if Trossard starts in a matchup that matters? It felt a little bit silly, but gives me a little bit more conviction that you kind of think along the similar lines. And what about options like Hakan Çalhanoğlu and Toni Kroos? I mean, they look pretty good as well. If Kroos starts without Luka Modric, Hakan's been taking most of the set pieces lately. I don't know if you've had time to dig into that situation, but he's consistently taking more than Federico DiMarco. He does take penalties. That stands out to me that Hakan, might be a pretty good play in a pretty crowded midfield this week.
Yeah, I mean, I would have concerns at that price point given the odds.
Yeah.
But Toni Kroos, I'm there with you. I think Toni Kroos could have a big game here.
Yeah, sometimes we worry about minutes with Toni Kroos, right? But he's played 90 minutes very consistently. He's kind of being called upon. He's another one of these. It's really tough once you turn 30 and then you start calling 33-year-olds old. I'm like, oh, that's brutal for me. But I don't know. That's tough. But I guess when Camavinga is out, when Tchouaméni is out, he kind of just has to suck it up and go for it. Maybe he'll be rested a little bit later. I mean, 90 minutes of Toni Kroos at 6,700 sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, I think given that the game matters and given that all the injuries are there and the recent logs, he's been playing 90 a lot, like you said. That feels like either he gets subbed off early because they're winning and hopefully he has contributed with an assist or two, and you're happy with that either way, or just a full 90 minutes of him. I think you'll be happy. So that's the one that's high on my list.
All right, that's awesome. I mean, it sounds like it might be a 3 midfield slate as we keep on talking this out. There were a couple other interesting plays to me. Rodrigo Zalazar he's more of defensive midfielder, but he takes a lot of set pieces for Braga. That's a name that popped up that seemed interesting. I know I've looked at David Fratesi. He was cheaper on some interleague slates, but he's got a decent floor, so he's worth investigating more, though I don't have much to say about him at the moment. And then, you got like a Henrik Mkhitaryan at 4K. Not as into the Inter matchup, but when the price is 4K, it's a little bit more palatable. I personally never play Henrik, but it's worth mentioning. Do you think you're going to dive into these, Zalazar and below type of options? Anything pop out that looks interesting to you?
I don't think so. I think that the cheapest I've been looking at upon a quick scan is Brahim Diaz. That's kind of I think he's at 56.
Something like that.
I don't see myself dipping below that unless it's an unexpected starter who doesn't normally play that ends up somewhere. But given the projected lineups that we have up right now, that's kind of the cheapest I see myself going.
Yeah. I mean, there's a case that you can make for some of these guys, but you're looking at a lot of underdogs, which isn't so appealing. Like, okay, Luka Suchik, I noticed he took corners over the weekend for RBS, but that's 3,900. That's too much. And when there's so many good midfielders, you don't want to be getting cute, I think. If you have to spend 3,500 for a midfielder, I'm kind of questioning how you got to that lineup construction in the first place, because it looks like midfield is the priority to get at least 2 of these players in.
Right.
I think there is a random cheaper midfielder for Benfica. I mean, to go to the matchup you're not as interested in. João Neves. I want to look up what his price is. 5,500. He's been splitting some set pieces lately, although I haven't had time to investigate the situation fully. Probably not a priority to play in a ho-hum matchup, a $5,500 midfielder, but it's just a name that's out there, especially if Benfica do something weird. It should be on your radar at least, but probably not worth causing too much interference.
Yeah, maybe you throw him in some GPP lineups, but not something I'd be looking to play in cash.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, probably not in cash. I mean, I'd probably rather play Brahim Diaz, but I mean, talk about your João Neves and Casper Tengstedt stacks, your two new favorite players after watching the show, and that's only going to cost you 9,500. Maybe you can take down a big GPP doing something like that. But anyone missing from midfield that we haven't discussed yet?
You mentioned Kubo, who I'm somewhat interested in, but a little bit expensive, so I'm not sure if I could realistically get there. I just think a lot of the mid price, like sub 7,000 players are interesting paired with someone like Bellingham is kind of my initial thoughts.
Yeah, it sounds like a good way to do some tournament constructions for sure. All right. Well, let's move into defender. And I think on the show yesterday, I was talking about this might not be the more exciting. This might be the worst of the defending options, much less exciting. And maybe you see something that I don't, Basil, but it's a little bit gross to me. So we have high-priced, sometimes set-piece taking wingbacks for Union Berlin, but that spot's not really a priority. Trimmel 6,600, Juranovic, he's coming off from injury at 5,900. I don't even know if any, and then Robin Gosens 5,400. I don't even know if any of them are playing 90 minutes. And as underdogs, I'm not playing an underdog unless I know that they've got a rock-solid role and will play, that full 90. Maybe an underdog you could consider. Our favorite non-defender who actually plays as an attacking midfielder, Diogo Goncalves. He's been priced up by DraftKings. They've been a little bit diligent on the matter at 5,700. I don't really know what I want to do with Goncalves. I haven't built a lineup out yet. 5,700 might be a little bit too expensive. How are you approaching him? Is that just too rich now? Or maybe he'll play 90 minutes against a rotated Bayern squad and be able to get some floor?
Yeah, I think that will come down to the players that Bayern put out. If it looks like a Bayern B squad, I'm a lot more interested. But if Kane and Sané are out there, very unlikely that I look there when you've got serviceable players in the, 3,000 and 4,000s. I just wouldn't want to pay up there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at game logs, and Goncalves got 11.1 points against Bayern, but it does really make a difference when you're playing at home in Champions League versus making a trip to a Bayern Munich stadium, even if the game doesn't necessarily matter as much. Yeah, I mean, it's tough for me to ever get excited about someone like Zinchenko in DFS, who is the most expensive defender. I found myself scrolling for quite a while before I found someone I liked.
Yeah, Zinchenko is, probably going to play 90, but might get subbed off early. It happens, but given that may not go 90, and I just don't think there's enough upside there to pay up when you have other options that are cheaper, which I guess we could transition into, Mazraoui and Alphonso Davies. If they play, they're cheaper. If Bayern actually puts out a real team, there's no reason those guys couldn't have big games. And, I'm not excited about someone like Ben White either, to be honest, just given how Arsenal play. But I'd be more likely to play Ben White than Zinchenko, I think.
Yeah, me too. And you should be careful on this program when you disrespect Ben White, because he usually puts on his windmill dunk performances after that. I think I famously called him a fake fullback, and I think he scored 2 goals in the next 5 games after that. It can be a bit painful when you're in this seat, but I agree with you. I think if I was spending in the mid-range, Alphonso Davies, Mazraoui, I feel a little bit better about their minutes. I mean, especially if they put out a strong squad, they're probably going to be rotating the attacking midfield players. They're not going to be making it a priority to use their 5 subs on their defenders. Do you share that same impression?
Thinking. Yep, exactly. So that's why I feel a little bit better about them. And it's easier to take a risk on a cheaper player, right? So it doesn't hurt as much when your $4,000, $5,000 player doesn't go 90 minutes. So
yeah. Well, it does hurt when they score 3 points and you jam 2 of them. Shout out Rico Lewis and Teo Hernandez. But it's not as hurtful. It's not like you're playing Leroy Sané and you're screaming because he only has 12 points and gets subbed off at the 60-minute mark.
Exactly.
But yeah, I had to keep on scrolling and keep on scrolling and keep on scrolling. And the first name that stuck out to me, and I think given the context of everything, wanting to spend up, Christian Borja on Braga. He's an attacking player from what I've seen, and he's chipped in with a few set pieces recently as well. I mean, honestly, if you just told me he's a $3,300 attacking-minded fullback without any other context, I'd be like, sign me up in this spot because Braga are favorites. Might be one of the most popular players in the slate. I know Ulysses Garcia was about 70% in cash. I'd expect something similar for Christian Borja, closest thing that seems to me to be a lock on this slate.
Yeah, that's a player that I have here that I'm looking at. I actually think there's 3 players in a similar price range, although Borja is the cheapest. I think you've got Danny Carvajal and Victor Gomez as well at 38 and 37, who are serviceable and very likely go 90. So I think I could see a world where you play them 3 all together and just play 3 big dogs, in forward and midfield. So I could see constructions like that.
Yeah, I've often made fun of Danny Carvajal in this program, but he was like inexplicably priced at like 6,500 a month or two ago. Now at 3,800, give me the Danny Carvajal. I'm one of his biggest fans. That's also a name that stood out to me. I don't know too much about Victor Gomez, though. I guess I was looking at the other flank. What have you been able to dig up on him?
I don't know too much either. I know through 5 games, he has played an average of 78.4 minutes and has an average point output of 7.42 points. So you actually get about 2.3 points per $1,000 spent. So it's actually quite a good return. So, I don't know much about him. I don't know much about how they plays, but that is what the spreadsheet is telling me.
Shout out the spreadsheet. I think I'm going to need you to go through that analysis one more time, but round to the 100th place. We need a few more significant digits on that. Yeah, I don't think you have to sell me too much. Borja stood out to me because of set pieces, but I think like in today's slate, Teo Hernandez wasn't good, but David Calabria did well. So stands to reason that one of these players should do well. And like you said, I mean, why not just play both, to be completely honest?
Yep, definitely could. And though, yeah, I could. It really just depends on which expensive players you want to play for or pay for, and how you construct the rest from there.
Yeah, I think so. But we're talking through it. There's some cheap forward options that might be suitable for tournaments, but you're probably spending up more in cash. We love these higher priced midfielders, so maybe that, and we don't really like the punts at the midfield position whatsoever. So, as the clouds are parting and we're breaking on the slate 48 minutes in, I'm definitely seeing the merits to this type of construction. But, got 24 hours to still tinker around. Less, like 18. Anyone else stand out to you? I know Amar Didic has been played, but not for RB Salzburg, and he hasn't taken a set piece for a while. So I recommend you not just game log watch and fall for that trap. 2,700, Juan Jesus, he's not really an attacking fullback whatsoever. So I also kind of consider that a trap if he starts for Napoli. It's not a great matchup against Real Madrid, and you are forgoing some pretty strong options in that range. And the last name, I'll actually say someone who might be decent, Kim Min-jae at 3K as a center back. Just too cheap. I mean, why not? Maybe he accidentally scores a goal.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see myself getting there, given the other 3 players we mentioned under 4K. But maybe in some, for GPP, you want to put in a Sané cross to a Kim Min-jae header for correlation. I could see a world where you get there.
Why not? And maybe it's good enough if the cheap fullbacks all score around 8 points and Kim Min-jae gets 6 and a clean sheet, and that's the 300 you needed to go from Horta to your boy Bruma, then maybe that makes all the difference in the world. Right. Just one name that stuck out. That's just definitely a misprice on DraftKings' part. I think that covers defender, though. It's going to be a punt city. Maybe that gives you some leverage if you want to play one of these expensive options. We ignored Federico DiMarco, who cost 6,300, but the set pieces haven't quite been there. I feel fine ignoring him. He plays 70 minutes quite often. Just not super tempted. He can always give you the blade, but you have to spend quite a lot. And I might, even if he gets a good return, I might be able to beat you on value and paying up at other spots.
Yeah, I have no interest.
No interest. Oh, I love it.
None.
Federico DiMarco sucks, quote unquote. No. We won't go with that. All right, let's dig into goalkeeper then. So we don't have a tab for goalkeeper, unfortunately. But Basil, I'll let you take this one away. You like to think about goalkeeper as one of the kind of first stages that you use to help feel out the slate sometime. What goalkeeping matchup seems most interesting to you?
I think I'm just going to go with Lunin of Real Madrid.
Lunin.
Not really based on the matchup, but just he hasn't played much, and it probably doesn't matter to look at his game logs, but seriously, if you pulled him up,
I will.
Every game is big. So.
Oh, geez. Okay.
He cares, clearly.
He cares. Yeah, we have the caring narrative. We tested a lot of your narratives today. We had the backup goalkeeper narrative. That did not work well for the Manchester City part. Ter Stegen's backup was good enough to get you in that, to win you the king of the pitch seat. Yeah, these are pretty stellar performances. He was getting a lot of saves. I feel like Kepa often gets a lot of good performances too. So maybe it's just something about how this Real Madrid plays. It's conducive to conceding saves.
Yeah, I think it's, they must be sound defensively, but they give up maybe long range shots, which is easier saves for the keepers, something like that. I don't watch enough Real to give a good opinion there, but I believe he's the third choice goalkeeper, right? So, he's going to be playing in front of the, in the big stage, just trying to make a name for himself. So.
Yeah, and he's not a total scrub. I've seen Lunin's name show up on plenty of slates before, just with, whatever random clown car injuries are happening. I feel like Real Madrid have been pretty unfortunate lately with goalkeeper injuries. So I would say he's definitely comes off to me as a competent backup. I know he starts for the Ukrainian national team too. I hope I'm not wrong with that. So putting that all together, I think he's a decent player. So it's not like it's a complete unknown we're plugging in there. So I feel better as far as talking about backup goalkeepers that Lunin can play. And just to go up to this narrative, I feel like it's something I've said. I also don't watch a lot of Real Madrid, but some of these players are just known for shooting a lot. Like David Alaba takes direct free kicks when he has the opportunity. They're not necessarily crossing. So those often lead to save opportunities. I know Toni Kroos and Fede Valverde will often test the goalkeeper from range. And then, Vinny Jr. is just a shoot on sight type of player. Well, I'm talking about the wrong goalkeeper, am I not? You should have stopped me.
I was just like, I'm not sure if I'm missing something, so I'll just let you continue.
Wow, that was one of the dumbest things I've ever done. I don't think the goalkeeper gets saved if Jude Bellingham decides to go rogue and shoot at it. Sometimes it's a little too late on the After Dark show. You can absolutely scrub that last minute. But it was a really passionate display of the shooting from distance capabilities of this Real Madrid team. Maybe that means if you need to spend down, we'll get a take out of it. I'll get my soccer writer of the year credentials. Alex Merritt, if you're looking for cheap saves. There you go. That's your boy. You can book it.
Yeah, I would also consider Ramsdale. It's more expensive than Lunin, but, Ramsdale doesn't get to play anymore. And it's a matchup that matters to Arsenal. All the regular starters should be there. And I don't believe in their opponents, Lon, very much. So, if you want to pay up, that's where I'd be looking.
Did you see this clip with Ramsdale talking about how every 15 minutes he yells at the fans and dances a little bit or something like that because he can't pay attention?
No, but that's pretty awesome. Just because Arsenal has the ball too much or what?
I guess Arsenal have the ball too much, but he was talking to some Arsenal legends. I can't remember what their names are, but he's like, yeah, sometimes I just can't sit there. So, I'll yap at the opposing fans or I'll just dance for a little bit and then I'm ready to go for 15 more minutes. I'm like, Man, it sounds like this guy is like an undiagnosed like ADHD on that sort of spectrum. So that wasn't the most necessarily inspiring thing I've heard a goalkeeper saying, like, "Oh, I can't focus for more than 15 minutes at a time." But that's probably just narrative. I mean, go ahead. Lon's stinking. It's a good home spot for Arsenal. I will personally never tout the Arsenal goalkeeper, though. So if you want to spend down, I plan on highlighting Bryce Samba in my column and praying he gets saves if you need to spend in that range.
Yeah, I think Lon won the reverse fixture, right?
They
So
did at home, but
yeah.
yeah. I think that's way too much discussion on goalkeeper, and really I fumbled quite a lot there, so I won't waste any more of your folks' time. Um, Basil, this was another fantastic show. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for spot starting for Ryan Belangi. You came in here and you care. You put in a great shift. You put in your full 90 minutes. Definitely worthy tout DFS play. So thank you so much for joining us. Do you have anything for the people before we sign off?
Less confident in my predictions today than I was yesterday. Just didn't have as much time to think about it. So take the advice with some caution. But looking forward to a single entry king of the pitch tomorrow, and hopefully take that one down.
Yeah, those are your bread and butter. You've won them all. But I'm feeling super confident in my takes. You should just tail me with complete confidence. Jude Bellingham shoots a lot, so that's good for Andre Lunin's saves. So take that to the bank, Lunin lock. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Good luck tomorrow.